If you look up the word iconic or icon in the dictionary, you will not find this lady's picture. She's not quite that old yet, but you will find a description that perfectly fits her. An icon is a person who completely embodies the thing that they're describing. And when I think of a living legend of Lake County, and specifically of Clermont and South Lake County, I think of the woman that we are honoring tonight. You're going to hear her life story. Please help me welcome your living legend, Ann Dupee. Testing 1, 2. Ooh, you get the louder one.
That's the louder one. All right.
Now, if you've seen the show Inside the Actors Studio with James Lipton, you'll be familiar with the way I do this. I have a stack of blue cards, much like he does, and we're recording this, so you'll have a couple microphones, but you don't have to worry about how much you speak into one or the other. And I'm going to start at the beginning. I've heard that's a very good place to start,
Really?
according to the musical. So Ann, will you tell us, when were you born?
9/11 of 1934 in Kearney, Nebraska. My grandfather had a men's clothing store, which they lost in the Depression. So my mother and father headed west to Seattle and then to Yakima, Washington. They used to tell the story in Seattle, for 50 cents, they could go to a movie, have 2 hamburgers, pay a babysitter, and have a nice night out for 50 cents.
What was your father's name?
John.
And your mother's name?
Eleanor. I'm an Eleanor Ann, but I've always been Ann. So now medically in the passport, I'm Eleanor.
And you mentioned that your grandfather had a men's clothing store. When your parents moved out west, what did your father do for work?
He went to work for Lee Seaman Menswear, and when I entered junior high school, he was promoted and opened a new men's store in Ellensburg, Washington, which was cattle and potatoes, farming country. And of course, opening day, here are all these beautiful Horsham shoes and Kuppenheimer clothes, and the farmers and the people came in and they wanted jeans and flannel shirts, and so a lot of the inventory changed quickly. But my fun thing was when we did inventory, I got to go down and match up the ties and the handkerchiefs and the socks and make them into gift packages. And it was a lot of fun.
Well, you mentioned that you were born during the Depression, that there was that had been lost, and your family moved. What kind of things did your family do to make ends meet in Washington?
We lived in Yakima. There was a vacant lot next door, and the house that we rented now has another house in the backyard. So that gives you a idea how deep the lot was. But one family had the parking strip for their victory garden. Dad brought in a roller, and we had a badminton court in the first of the lot next door to us. And in the back, the men dug a root cellar because in the winter it was cold. So my mother canned all summer long. And the people that lived in the back across the alley had orchards and fruit. So we traded out vegetables and fruit, and so we ate very well during the war. But my job was to, in the soil there, we made kind of a V. We had a flume that was the width of the lot, and so my job every morning was to go out and put the hose in and open up which rows I was irrigating and weeding. And then if I was a good girl and did it, why, I got to go swimming at the Yakima pool and ice skating at the Yakima rink at night. So I'm really glad that I was able to thank my dad for having a real nice childhood. Sometimes we don't get to do that, we don't think about it or do it, but it was a great growing up. But I didn't know any different, you know, you did what you were told, and you got to do nice things.
I know the area you moved to, you described to us was farming and cattle. Did that mean there was something to do with the rodeo as well?
Yes, at that time, the Ellensburg Rodeo was the 5th largest purse rodeo in North America. And my mother was had charge of the homecoming court. And I started as an usher for the grandstands and worked up to the head usherette. And so I'd tell everybody what to do, and then the rodeo would start, and I'd go over to the buckaroo chutes and climb up, and I could sit right on the corner here at the top of the stairs right over to watch all the action. It was fun.
We talked beforehand. One of my favorite parts of this series is that I get to go spend hours with some fascinating people who have done such a wide range of really amazing things. So I got to spend a couple hours with you the other day. If you get to go have lunch with Anne, she's in a fantastic facility. Right? It's like apartments. You're in a sort of a active adult
individual apartment.
But they have a fantastic lunch.
Yes.
So. Yeah, hit her up. You might get to go have lunch with her someday.
Well, John Nicoli, people will remember Nicoli's restaurant. John is one of our chefs now. So.
Yeah, it's quite good. So we talked a little bit, and we talked about you in school, and you said you did pretty well in school until a certain class in high school. Can you tell us what that was?
Algebra. The light bulb, we're doing the same thing now. The light bulb never went off. And the high school football coach taught algebra. And he tutored me in the lunch hour in order to get me through. I would never been on today's honor roll, like I have to be all A's and B's, because I got a C in algebra.
So we know that algebra wasn't your strong suit, but was there a teacher there that did inspire you?
Yes. Actually, my first grade teacher, she married the publisher of the Yakima Daily Herald. And she said, how did I ever know that I trained an editor in the first grade? And then my second grade teacher, Miss Shoemaker, was left-handed. And so she made sure that I wrote like this. She had a ruler over me, but she never used it. But I thank her that she none of this. And then, but Merle Kibbe had built he was the industrial arts professor at it was a combination high school and the junior high, and the industrial arts department was in the new junior high. But he built a dark room over the complex and had a full photography class. I don't know if you ever saw the old big speed graphic cameras that had, the 4x5 film, and you put the plates in. You put the plates in and took 2 pictures at a time. But that's how I learned that we had the dark rooms, and it was wonderful. And so I knew early on I wanted to do something in publishing. I thought I wanted to go to work for a big, slick magazine and do some traveling and just, be this. And I said, I'm never going to do small town newspaper.
We call that foreshadowing.
I worked for the Ellensburg Daily Record. I left my dad, he paid me 75 cents an hour to work at his credit bureau collection agency. And I went to the newspaper for 85 cents an hour. And the publisher said, but my dear, you are gaining experience. But I did 2 weeks at a time, the summer vacations, did a lot of the darkroom work, and took pictures. Took picture by Adlai Stevenson when he came in town. I remember the first time I was late for dinner because we had some poor man that had this tractor roll over, and it was my first death that I had seen. So they sent me out on
So in high school, the darkroom, and did that lead to the annual, I think,
Yes,
seems to be what fits.
We had the annual. It's on. I brought some memorabilia. It was called the Camden View of '52, and we won both the Columbia Scholastic Press Association and the other one, the Northwestern Scholastic. The yearbook won both of them. We were unusual because we took pictures of students in the businesses that advertised. And Columbia, I think it was, marked us down for it and said, it's really such a unique idea while we're still giving you the
That's great. So you graduated high school. Where did you go from there?
Went to Washington State University. I am a cougar. People laugh about us old ladies, but I am a cougar. We are the Washington State Cougars. We did go to the Rose Bowl twice after 60 years. And went to Stanford one summer. And then I went to Portland. And
well, so my question for you in college, because you did do your summers with the paper,
with the
right?
paper, right.
In later years, you were known to give college students
Right.
summer jobs, even though technically the summer is the slower period.
Right.
Was that inspired by your experience in
Well,
college?
absolutely. We were a small department. The University of Washington had the big communications school, and we got a certificate. But out of the 30 people in the department, there were only 2 of us who could get a job on a newspaper. And so in the summer, when it was, there wasn't orange trees and citrus, didn't buy much advertising nor subscriptions. So it was pretty slim pickings in the early years before we got businesses here. But if somebody was a serious journalism major, why, I hired them. And when they left, they had a letter that said, to whom it may concern, this person worked at the Clermont, at the South Lake Press, and proofread and wrote stories and so they were then able. I had some kids that did very well.
Did any of them complain about 85 cents an hour?
I think I paid better than that.
Paid a little more than that by that point. So you finished college. Where did you go to work right after college?
I went to Portland. I didn't really want to go to Seattle. It was kind of big. And worked for the Associated Credit Bureaus of the Pacific Northwest. And in college, I was a member of Theta Sigma Phi, which was the journalism honorary. And I'm sitting on the floor at a meeting, and I'm talking to a woman who worked for KGW TV, had won a Peabody for a children's television series that she had created. And so I'm sitting there deciding if she was worthy to become a member of our chapter. But I mentioned to her that I'd like to get back in the business. And she said, we have an opening at the station, and I'll make you an appointment, call, and come over and interview. And so I went over, and they had all but called another woman to have the job, but I got the job. And it was a very exciting time because KGW at the time, it's part of the Mrs. Bullock owned these 3, King in Seattle, Prim in Spokane, and KGW in Portland. And we were going from black and white ABC to color NBC. So the network set up Bob Barker and the Truth and Consequences group. And they were to be there a week. Well, Dave Garraway had taken the Today Show to Europe, and he hired non-union French engineers. And so the engineers at NBC in Burbank struck. So management was running the network, and so they left TRC in Portland for a month. And there was one gal that was a script gal, and we became good friends over that time, they taught me how to play liar's poker in the bar at the Multnomah Hotel. And we went skiing, everybody went skiing up at Mount Hood, which was a beautiful ski resort in that beautiful lodge. And so it was a great time. So they went back to LA and Willie invited me to come down and visit. And so I gave him notice I was going to look for a job. And so I went to LA and I pounded the pavement for a week and got a job on Friday afternoon about 3 o'clock.
And didn't you say they tried to get you back at KGW?
Yes, and yeah, they did. They had to hire 2 people to replace me.
So again, you're the new girl. This is a story of your life a little bit, the new girl in several places. Your new boss, what did he do? What kind of clients was he catering to?
Well, he was hired to be the new business recruiter. And I learned about perseverance from George Irwin. Every Monday morning, I was to write a letter to a man who was the advertising manager for Bond department stores in New York City. And we had a very nice Bond store in LA on Hollywood Boulevard. And so every Monday morning, I'd write this little letter about something in LA or something about, whatever. The 53rd week, the phone rang, and it was this gentleman, Mr. Irwin there. Yes, put him through. Mr. Irwin, you're the most persistent person I have ever seen. You have the Bond account for Southern California. So it taught me a lesson that personal, and keep at it. And you can't tell me no if I don't ask.
So, what exactly did your boss do, and who were his main clients?
We looked for new business, but he brought with him Icecapades. And we did several promotions on our own. We had the LA promotion at the new LA Arena, and we put the stars out in a half-hour remote show, and then they were invited to ride around the rink in golf carts, and we wrote new propositions for new business, and so Bond department stores was one. It was kind of interesting because when they had remodeled this Bond store, and Bob Crane, if you remember Bob Crane from Hogan's Heroes, he was the morning man on KNX radio at the time, and he was at that opening when we went over for it. So I went to see him when I got the job with Icecapades and was in LA, and I went up to see him, and I walked in the office and he said, "It's the Bond lady." Now, what a memory. He hadn't seen me in 2 years, I think. And so I said, you want some tickets for opening night? You want to do a promotion? So we ran a promotion, and the woman who won it was a school teacher. And she said, "My students think I'm a mean, nasty person, and I want to take them to opening night of Icecapades and show them I do have a heart."
Your boss, other than being persistent, had a sort of funny quip you told me about where his office was located.
Oh, well, we were on the top. We were on Hollywood Boulevard, and 2 blocks from Hollywood and Vine, and 2 blocks from the Brown Derby. But we were in a bank building, and up there were 2 account executives and 2 secretaries up on the top floor. And he used to say, "My assets over $1 million."
Working in that field at the time that you did, as the young woman, the new girl doing that, did you run into some issues with some of the men that copywriters and that sort of thing?
Well, the big account for Wade Advertising, when I went to LA, I went with Wade Advertising. Their big account was Miles Laboratories, which was Speedy Alka-Seltzer. And they also had Alberto Culver. And so the LA agency was to do the production. And so the first day we had to get copy out for a show that we were doing in Texas. So I went down to the copy guy. Well, I'm doing Miles. So I went back, and so I wrote the copy for the radio and TV buys. And then I went down to the mimeograph. Anybody remember the mimeograph? Mimeograph and the purple fingers. And went down, well, you can't do that now. We're running off Miles Laboratory. So at 5:05, I go down to the mimeograph room, and I'm running off my stencil things, and then I go back up and I put them together. And about 8 o'clock at night, I go down, and the copy guy buyer was still down there in his office, and he said, "Aren't you the new girl?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, nobody else can do this, and it needs to be in the mail, but where is the post office?" Because I just had moved to LA, and I had no idea where the post office. He said, "I will take it."
At some point, your boss came to you and said something that changed your career once again. So what did he tell you?
Well, he walked in and he said they need an advanced girl with Icecapades, and I made you an appointment for 2 o'clock this afternoon. And 2 weeks later, I was on a train for New York.
So again, running motif, the new girl. So you're the new girl again. Now you're the new girl as the advanced girl for Icecapades.
Yeah.
Was the first year of that easy?
It was very difficult, but I was lucky because as a kid, I mentioned we had a skating rink that was an outdoor rink, but it was a regulation rink. So I was ice skating from the time I was 6 years old in our little ice skating club. And my train of thought was.
That helped you in your first year, the fact that you had been an ice skater?
So they sent the show to Atlantic City to the convention center, and they gave the show, put on the show at night to polish it before going to Madison Square Garden. And then, so I stayed there for a week or two to learn the show before they put me out on the road. And so we're sitting across from the convention center was a nice old bar, and the guy always had drinks for the show and a nice price and cheese and crackers and stuff. But Phil Romaine, there was a beautiful Adagio pair, Romaine and Steele. They were never amateur skaters, but they were ballet skaters. And so Phil came up to me. I was sitting at the bar, and Phil came up to me. Hi, I introduced himself, and I said, "I heard your ballet teacher was down from New York, and isn't it too bad that you missed that curve?" And he said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, down in the right thing and Kathy was supposed to do." And he said, "Oh my word, she knows ice skating." And from then on, the show was wonderful to me. They made all the difference in the world that I knew what I was supposed to be doing.
Well, you know, what's interesting is when we hear the term advanced girl, I'm not sure all of us know exactly what that means. So can you describe what your job was and how long you were out doing it?
I was out on the road for 49 weeks out of 52. I changed clothes with my cousin at her house in Cleveland, and their dachshund dog slept on my suitcase. And you know, you traveled with, I had a big Valpak and a smaller suitcase, a portable typewriter, and my hat box, and my purse, and that was it. And I lived in, so I bought good clothes. Saks Fifth Avenue had a little Saphinia shop, and at that time I was like a 7 or something, and so could get these really nice clothes that wore. But I kept a log of what I wore doing television interviews, so that I didn't show up in the city the next year wearing what I'd worn the year before. And the same thing with the newspapers. When you called on, particularly the women, said if you'll see over the beautiful dolls, Madame Celine Farr was our costume designer, and she, they were 2 feet tall, and they were exact replicas of the show. And in those times, the department stores had a big shopping bags. I could carry 5 or 6 of the dolls. And when you walked into a TV station, and showed them to the on-the-air people, you had an easy time booking. And the same thing with women's pages and things. So they were a great introduction.
So after your first year, were the other years a little easier after you'd
When
been
the end of the second year, when I got back to the bar, and it sounds like all I did was bar. At KNX, well, it's where the corner, it was our neighborhood, meeting place. And the second year I walked in and they said, "You look wonderful. You look terrible when you came off the road last year." Because unfortunately the girl before me sometimes would not show up. The arena people didn't know me. If I didn't show up, then my credibility would be blown. So the first year I had to prove that I would be on time. I was supposed to be in by Sunday night, call in, be ready to go at 7, 8 o'clock Monday morning. And so it took a year of proving to all the cities that I was reliable and they could count on me. So from then on, then they scheduled a lot of things. And so it was much easier.
I know you did that job for a couple of years, but then something happened in August of 1965 that changed your life forever. So what was that?
Well, I used to go when I was in LA. I lived in Hollywood when you could live in Hollywood. But we had a advertising association of the West. And I'd go to the conventions and met the Wall Street Journal group. And so I'd started my 5th year, and I called George Dupee. His boss had died in a small airplane crash, to see how Mrs. Deemster was. And so he invited me to lunch, and we had some lunches, and I had a dream of shoveling his driveway, which was like this. He said, "Well, if it's that bad, we better get married." So about 2 weeks later, we had a very lovely wedding. And the secret was, the little church we were married in, they had a wedding going to be that night, so I got to borrow some of their flowers. If they were happy, I paid them some for their, it worked out very well. And then we had the reception at the house, and the children ate all the food before the adults ever got to it, I think. But it was something very interesting, things you hear about. Well, I said that I knew the Wall Street Journal group, and the man who headed up Dow Jones was going to be the speaker at the Detroit Ad Club. So I went over to the Detroit Ad Club, being a member of the Los Angeles Junior Ad Club, and these men said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I came to hear Barney Kilgore. I know these people, and I'm a member, I'm an Ad Club member." "Oh, you're not getting in these doors, lady." And they would not let me in. Really?
At the time, what was George doing for a living?
George was he'd been promoted from the advertising manager of the Western edition to the Eastern edition of the Wall Street Journal. So he was living on Long Island in Manhasset.
And you lived there for some time, but then something changed that. What happened?
Well, I met he took the Long Island Railroad. And 3 times I put a roast in, and 3 times the train was late. But I met at this one night, and he said, some lady spiked me on the subway, and I kicked her back, and it's time we're out of here. And so he quit, and we looked around for something to do, and headed south. And we called on a newspaper broker in D.C. and we decided we were going south and had ordered the moving van. That Saturday before, we get a letter from this newspaper broker that the Clermont paper was for sale. So he flew down Monday and came back Tuesday. There was a realtor, Ed Albright, who took him all around and was just wonderful. The paper was in that old building on 8th Street. And he came back and he said, I found the most beautiful place to live. You'll have to work 3 or 4 years. And then you could retire. So before he died in January of '87. And I said, you know, at that point it was quite a few years. And he said, well, I wasn't quite truthful on that one. But, so I had it 25 years.
You took over the paper in 1968. Describe the Clermont that you found when you got here in 1968.
Well, as I said, it was beautiful citrus. The smell was wonderful. Citrus trees neither bought advertising nor subscriptions. And so it was, we didn't pay income tax for the first 2 years. We supported the paper out of our pocket. Fortunately, Publix was one of the first in the chain, and the man who was advertising manager for Publix had a sweetheart for Clermont, for this store here. So we always had the centerfold, and that really saved us. And then once a month I would get a 3rd page, and then Winn-Dixie finally came, and then Kmart came, and then 85, and in the 80s, 83, 85, and 89, the freezes happened. And it was a whole new ballgame.
By the time that you bought the paper and George told you you had to work 3 or 4 years, you were an experienced professional. You had quite a bit of experience under your belt. You were a wife and a stepmother to George's children from his previous marriage. But still, a lot of people treated you, again, like the new girl. So how did your husband set those people straight at the paper?
Well, we had the old-fashioned counter when you walked in, and then there was a lower desk where we had the advertising book and the legal book, and he would sit there. And somebody'd come in with stories and hand them to him, and he'd say, go see her. I had a little office, which in the beginning had no air conditioning, and he'd say, go see her, and they'd say, but you're the man. So he'd hold the story over the wastebasket and said, if you insist I take it, then this is where it's going. And so they eventually got to trust me and do it, and it worked up. Even Chief Apprentice Tyndall took me on a raid one night at 4:30 in the morning. He wouldn't let me ride with the lead cops, but I rode with him. And the secret of that was, it was a night of the full moon, so the cars sliding in, they could turn off the keys and turn off the lights, and we just slid right in and made a bunch of arrests that night. And then Sheriff Griffin's thing.
Hold that a little closer for me.
Okay.
Hold the mic.
Sheriff Griffin, whom his 2 sons, Monty and Griff Jr., they formed a narcotics team for the county. And they took me on a couple of raids out getting marijuana guys that were growing
Sheriff Griffin didn't mention anything about you in a field of marijuana, though. He did, when we talked, we didn't have that discussion, but you soon found out that deadlines are sort of unrelenting. And this is an interesting conversation. You talked about perseverance and about proving to people that you would show up. What happened at 4:30 a.m. on Wednesdays when you ran the paper?
Well, that was when you had to be to the post office to have the papers there in order to be distributed. And I've had people say, what do you know? You're retired. What do you know about deadlines? Well, 4:30 in the morning, 52 weeks out of a year for 25 years, and we never missed one. I woke Don Cox up one morning. A belt had broken, because unfortunately they didn't keep a set of belts handy. So I woke Don and Wanda up, and he came down and gave me some belts that got the press going. And then there was a guy, I can't remember who it was, but our little press, we owned our own press, which was great. But it printed 4 sheets at a time, 2 up and 2 down, and then there was an electric collator. And so then it pulled them down and sent them over, and they were all German. It was a German Gazette press, so it was all metric. And there was one guy in town that could had a shop at Mineola, so we woke him up more than once too.
The paper, you said it started to grow. What was the edition like when you started, and how far did you grow it? How big did your paper become?
Well, it was 12, usually 16 pages. It was a long tab, usually 16 pages when we started out, and it was running 40 to 48 when I sold it. So, and it was, I don't know if you remember Richard Swartz, who was our county commissioner, but I covered the county commission meetings. Lucy Blake and Virginia Polk had some great reporters. I never had a full-time person, Roxanne. But I had stringers for when I needed, when the happening was happening. And everywhere I went, I had my camera. So.
During your tenure, you reported on quite a lot of politics and city commission. What made you think that you could take on that job?
Well, I was always the reporter, covered city council meetings. And Dolores Carroll, who was the city clerk, paid me, I thought, a great compliment. She said, I do not do my minutes until the paper comes out, because usually you have it all there, and it saves me a bunch of time. But I used to wonder why they made some of the decisions they made. And it really isn't until you get to be sitting in that seat and you do the background and you talk to people and you really dig in and know what's going on, that you should be able to then arrive at a decision. You can't do it just going to a council meeting and listening to what's presented then. I used to like to go to planning and zoning meetings because people are a little more straightforward than they are at city council. It seems to
Now, so I believe someone came to you and suggested that either you or your husband should run.
Right.
What was your husband's thought?
Well, Hal Turkle, Hal cringes every time I tell this story, but Hal's the one that came over to the house one night and he said, why don't one of you two run for city council? And George said, well, it's not going to be me. So I did, and so I get elected, and then I get unelected, and then I get elected, and then I get unelected. It was 11 years over from 83 to 06.
You told me something interesting about how your husband's reaction to you getting elected. He was happy?
Oh, he didn't have to go to the meetings anymore. If people will sit there and they'll think I'm doing. So I don't have to go anymore. Except one night I told him I'd gone to the planning and zoning meeting. And Steve Ritchie, I don't know if you remember Steve Ritchie, who's, a great land use attorney. And Steve was telling me it was the property over by Jacks Lake Road. And his client wanted a high density apartment, and he's going, the land is here, but the zoning flushes it out. I said, George, you have got to come hear this guy.
When you served on the commission, you had some fantastic opportunities to shape Clermont's future. So can you tell us some of the things you remember the most and that you're happy that you were involved with as a commissioner?
Yeah. Well, the most exciting thing to me in this, and having to be able to be part of it, when Bob Westrick became president of Lake Sumter, he came down and talked to Kiwanis, talked to somebody else, and he said, I'm looking for 40 acres for somebody to give me so I can build a school down here. And they were going to do one in Sumter County because somebody had given them land, and he said, we can't afford to buy it, but I'm looking for land. So I called Darrell Carter, and it was, the Carters owned a lot of property in town. They owned Skytop, and it was an interesting how in those days, this whole thing, how your word is what. I found out that the Carters had bought Skytop, and I went back to my office and I called the number, and Lord Carter, and I said, welcome to Clermont. And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, I understand you just bought Skytop. Well, that's not public knowledge. It's not to be public knowledge, or it could kill the deal. And I said, well, I won't run anything, and it was up deadline. I won't run anything if you will give me exclusive when you close. So about 2 months later, the phone rings late on Tuesday afternoon. It's Darrell. He said, we just closed Skytop. I'm on the way to the office and I'll give you the story. And that was done, somebody I'd never met, and done, and the both of us. And since then, they have become very good friends. But I called Darrell first and I said that this tall guy's come to town. He used to be a basketball player, Westrick did. And he's looking for 40 acres. And silence. And so Darrell said, well, I'll talk to Dan. So then I called Bob Mandel, and Greater Construction was known in the area for building a good home. I sat with Bob Mandel on the Regional Planning Council, which was a wonderful experience. I enjoyed doing that when I was on City Council. And so I called Mandel and I said, this tall drink of water's looking for 40 acres, and they own what's now, I think, the hills of Mineola, somewhere up there, the lot of acres. And so both of them called me back and offered 40 acres to the community college. And the college chose the Carter property. Originally, the property was where Summit Greens now is. But Darrell and Shannon Elswick, who ran the hospital, became very good friends. And so they got talking and they went up to looking at the site in their four-wheelers, and so the switch was made. And then the dream began, because the hospital had bought the 40 acres from the Gibb family, and it fronted on Citrus Tower. the skytop land was Hancock. So it became this vision then of what you could have. And then at the same time, Mike Gray came to town, and John Moore with him eventually. And we were doing the triathlons. Fred Sommer had started the Great Floridian, and we were having 1,000 people coming to do those races. And so Mike organized, the finish line was down Montrose Street, and there were 75 medical people between doctors and therapists and nurses and stuff to walk the athletes as they finished it was very exciting. So Dennis Reed was the principal of Clermont, Cypress Ridge, and he belonged to our Kiwanis Club, but I had him as a program to tell us what was going on. So he mentioned that all of his teachers were there except one who was with her husband over in England, meeting with the English Olympic team. Ooh, I want to talk to this guy. So I called and talked to Jeff Duke. And so Jeff came down and met with Wayne Saunders and Shannon. And so this thing of the training center all got started. And so the hospital, the Carters gave them 10 acres, gave the hospital for the wellness center. The hospital bought another 10. And then the idea of the training center, and so USA Triathlon came, and there was a really great guy Fred was on the board, and they had a very fine executive director, and he got real excited that Clermont become kind of the Eastern Olympic training. They weren't going to leave Colorado Springs, but that this would become, because it then became the 70-meter pool and all the training stuff. And the dream, Randy Johnson, who became our rep, he was running the Central Florida Sports Commission, and we had meeting. It was just so exciting. It was just so exciting of the possibilities. There are very few places in the world, ladies and gentlemen, that have what's sitting up on those 300 acres. You have a first-class hospital backed by a first-class hospital. You have training. It's showing how many Olympic people are coming. You have a community college. Dr. Sedor, our new president, sent his regrets that he couldn't be here tonight because they have a meeting. But I met with him, and he's interested in courses that are going to be good jobs here. We now get the AA in nursing. He wants the full nursing program. In IT, we want up-to-date courses that our kids, the young man that helps me out, that works for Ben Holman, he's going to have to go to UCF because we don't give the courses. He wants to go further. So he did me a really good critique of what we needed, what he needed, his fellow students. But Dr. Sedor is really on to this, that, let's get it going. I also want a women's soccer team for the college, because Casey now has a semi-pro team in Mount Bird Academy. Then you've got the Lions, the Lady Lions. Dr. Dodd had started it, and it just kind of, after she was gone, but this is the time now for a women's soccer team. We'll have a team here, we'll have some prestige, and we'll have a feeder, so he was excited, so it's exciting when you can, the people, it's unlimited what we can do up there.
We should just record that as a commercial for Clermont. That's pretty good.
I haven't been doing that all my life.
you know, we talked privately about how you and George chose not to have any biological children, but you have a big metaphorical child that you had together. So we would describe that as the paper, is that right?
Paper, yeah.
After George's death, he had written the editorials, is that right?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so who did that go to?
Well, George was 14 years older than I. He grew up in the Depression. His parents died when he was 9 and 11. He fortunately had an older sister that he lived with in high school, and then he went to California, San Francisco area, and got into Kings Point, the Merchant Marine Academy, and spent the end of World War II on a merchant ship in the Black Sea, and then got called back in the Korean War as a navigator on the Navy ammunition ship. And so he had a little more experience than I. And I tried one, and I left a few names out, and he said, "You're never doing this again." So everybody, he'd come in and he'd sit in that little office, and he'd do his editorial. And I remember Don Livenbaum, he said, "You know, I just can't wait until I see what George is doing this week." But I was very concerned because when he died, I was not an editorial writer. I'd never done one. And I left my house, and my Beta Theta sister, Tony Bell, passed me on the street, and she took one look at my face and said, "Something's wrong, let's go back to your house." So we talked about it, and she said, "Well, do you think you could do it?" And well, she said, "Try it and do it." So I did it, and I did it.
So you took over the editorial writing. Do you still write today?
I do remember when column for me. That's fun. I think one of the things that people feel close in Clermont is because Remember When's been done since before we bought the paper. And the history, when you see and now, you know, names come up, and they know I know the names, and they're very kind about letting me do this Remember When column. But I think it means a lot to a community if you have that. And then of course Doris Bloodsworth with her books has just really cemented, and of course our Gem of the Hills books. And the Library Association's redoing that, so that'll be an upgrade on the great history here.
We all try to impart lessons to our children, but they tend to teach us things. So what was the biggest lesson that the newspaper, that the South Lake Press and being in that business teach you?
The accurate. I have to admit, the night I sold it, and I went over to what was in the sit on the corner, and I heard more stories of what they couldn't tell me. But I'd walk up to people and they'd stop talking. George told me it would be a very lonesome life, and to a good extent that was very true. People just, you know, they just didn't want to get. You didn't know. I'm very proud of the fact that I was never sued. I did all of the thefts and the arrests and the counsel, and I, 25 years, was never sued. So I thought that was a pretty good record.
It is very impressive. From studying for this conversation today and talking to so many business leaders in your community, I know that when you sold your paper, you didn't just settle down and knit. You got busy doing other things. So what kind of things have you been doing since then?
Well, I'm very pleased tonight. Sam and Kathy Davis are here. The city of Clermont very nicely has me as their representative on the Lake Topeka Natural Gas District Board. And Sam, thank you for coming.
Hold that microphone a little closer for me. Hold it.
And Beta Theta formed in 1979, so I've been active in that. And Kiwanis, I was the first woman inducted into Kiwanis here. And that's kind of a nice story, you know, the attorney Tom Doherty. And he had a little building, and he wanted to rezone it commercial, and I didn't think it was in a location that should be commercial, so I voted against him. And he campaigned against me, and he gave money against me, and but one day the phone rings, and some woman had sued Rotary for not allowing women in, and the case had been decided by the U.S. Supreme Court about 2 weeks before our Kiwanis Convention that women should be allowed in service clubs. So I was Tom on the line, and he said, our South Lake Kiwanis Breakfast Kiwanis Club, there are some women in town that we want to join, and I'd be honored to sponsor you. So, you know, you can't overcome, and we're good friends now. So it's a nice story, I think.
Today you live in an active adult community. You're a dedicated chamber ambassador. I even heard from somebody who went with you, much younger than you, by the way, that you recently were at a concert till about midnight dancing with lead singers and other people. So,
Carlos.
So what keeps you going?
I just always have. It's this getting old, I'll tell you. It's been very difficult to slow down, but I have my turtle to remind me.
You're pretty famous around our county for wearing cute hats, colorful dresses, so I'm going to ask you the question that you probably, people don't know whether they could ask you or not. What's the story with the little hats and flowers and things?
When we moved here, and maybe it's why people didn't really remember because, or think, because I wore my hair in a ponytail, and I always had a flower back here or a ribbon, so George could find me and you know, I'd look for the ribbon, but I always had worn it, and then I think Mary Lightcap gave me the Statue of Liberty hat, and that kind of started the fun hat things, and so I started wearing the hats to the chamber breakfast. Every time somebody from St. John's came, I wore Nemo the fish. So it's just kind of become a trademark, and it's fun. It's fun.
You've been inducted into how many different Hall of Fames? 4. You can say it loud enough if you want.
4.
It's. I mean, that's seems a little greedy on the face of it. No. So, what advice do you have to other overachievers about community involvement?
Well, just get involved, and you'll find that you know, things happen. I didn't go looking for anything, but it's just, I just have to be, I guess, lots of things in the right place at the right time. I love my community and all you people. It's very nice of you to even want to come and hear all this. I'm in awe.
I think we would agree that so far you've lived a pretty amazing, productive life, done some pretty incredible things. So I'm going to make this the last question's a little hard, because you do have a wealth of, you have such a large life experience. If you had to pick something that would be your greatest accomplishment or the thing that fulfilled you the most, 1 or 2 things, what would that be?
Well, it would be having the honor of having the paper and being responsible. And the other would be being in on the ground floor of the what's up on the hill, of the training center and the college, and I'm still active in doing it, so as long as I can. Every day is a gift, and may we all remember that and take it seriously. I'm just, thank you all for coming. It's nice to see Russ Sloan, my women's club, and our historical and good Dame and Gail. Thank you. Susie. Oh.
Well, I have to say, I know you say every day's a gift, but in my mind, today's probably a little bit an even better gift. We want to thank you for your time and for sharing your life story with us. Ladies and gentlemen, will you help me thank our living legend of Lake County, Ann Dupee.